Olive, welcome. And thank you so much for coming down and doing this with us. So I just want you to explain to everybody else a little bit about yourself. So just say who you are, your name, and just a bit about your background, where you went to school, and what you do.
Right, I'm Olive, Olive Murray. I was born and grew up in the East End of London, went to school in the East End of London. And then I left school for about a year.
Okay.
And then I decided to go back into full-time education to get GCSEs and A-levels because I wanted to be a midwife, and at the time I needed 5 GCSEs to do that. So I went back to study to get my GCSEs, and then I found I quite liked it, having had that year's break away from school.
Yeah.
This was in a sort of a community college, which I went back to. So at the end of the year when I did my GCSEs, because it was a year's course, I went for a few interviews for hospitals to apply to be a midwife, but I found that I quite liked studying, so I decided I wasn't going to be a midwife. I was going to stay on and do some more exams, take some A-levels, and in the process I decided perhaps I'll go to university. I'd quite like university, so I sort of passed it by some of the teachers in the community college, and they said, try it. You may succeed. And then
so they were quite encouraging then.
Well, they were up until the point when I decided I wanted to go to Cambridge. And I'd gone somewhere and I'd seen this advert or seen this poster for Lucy Cavendish College, which is a ladies' college, a women's college in Cambridge. Okay. And then something sort of struck in my brain. Why don't you apply to this college? So I went back to my community college and said, what do you think of the idea of me applying to go to Cambridge University? And I had a really good history teacher, I was brilliant. And at the time he said to me, forget it, you won't get in. And I said, why? He said, well, you've got a few factors against you.
Okay.
And I said, and they are? He said, well, first of all, you're black. Secondly, you're working class. And thirdly, you're a woman. Because at that time, it was predominantly men.
Yeah.
And the fact he said that made me decide, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to get into this college. And then it was an uphill struggle. Because then, it wasn't that they weren't so supportive, but that they sort of talked me out of it. But the whole process of getting into an Oxbridge college was quite difficult. I had to sit the Oxbridge exam because they have their own special sort of entrance exam as well as having my A-levels, etc. And of course there was no facility for me to study it in my college because they didn't cater for anybody going to university, as private schools do. You actually stay on an extra term after you've done your A-levels. You go back for an extra term to just study specifically for that. Well, they didn't have that facility in my community college, and so I had to commute once a week to Cambridge to sort of a tutorial college to study for the Oxbridge exam. Okay. And then this is all in the process of doing my A-levels as well. Then there was some industrial action where the caretakers were on strike, so the college was closed, and it was kind of near to the time when we were meant to be doing our exams, and so it was an absolute nightmare. But the long and short of it was that I did. Oh, also taking the exam, taking the actual Oxbridge exam. There was no facility for me to take it in London. My college couldn't. They didn't cater for it, so I had to ring them up and say, I'll take the exam, but I don't quite know where to take it. So they invited me to Cambridge to stay for a few days in order to do it. But in the long and short of it was I got in. So
wow.
Yeah, I did.
Determination.
Sweat. But yes.
Okay. Yeah. So once you got into Cambridge and you got in there, what was it like? You know, because he was obviously saying you're not going to fit in. You've got factors against you.
Well, I think what he said basically was true. I was the only working class person because it's intercollegiate, so it's a bunch of colleges, and in my college I was like the only working class person in my college. I was the only black. In fact, I made history because I was the first black female undergrad in Cambridge. Well, not in Cambridge, but certainly in Emmanuel College, which was my college. I was the only black student, the only black student in the whole of the university history faculty, because I went up to read history, so I was the only black person there. So I was working class, I was black, and I was a woman. Well, the woman, at that time, they were slowly taking women in. I think my year was the first year where they had a full quota of women in each of the 3 years.
Wow.
So they'd only just started taking women. A lot of the colleges still didn't take women, so it was still predominantly male. But that wasn't so much a factor. It was more the fact that, yes, I kind of got stared at a little bit, especially because we had to wear gowns and things to go to chapel and various things. And so when you sort of went out of college and you were in your gown, I'd kind of get stared at, thinking she must belong to the university kind of thing. So, but it was fine. I think I had to go with the determination in my mind that perhaps I was going to be different, but that shouldn't stop me from partaking in a really good education and trying to make the most of life in Cambridge. It was very different, obviously, from my background, and most of them, all of them were public school, and they'd all sort of boarded in public school as well. So it was that kind of. I think it's changed very much now, and it's much more open, an open field. But at that time,
and how long ago was that?
That was in the 80s.
In the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s. So
yes. Yeah, not that long ago, but yeah.
Well, it's funny because I went back. I went back this year, and. I did an interview with a black student. I think he was a mixed race student, and then I was sort of relating, my history to her, my story, and she said, well, it's still not equal, which wouldn't be, and it's there's not many black people actually in the whole university. It's still not. It could do better, and I said to her. I think it's fantastic. I said, well, I actually asked her, how many black students are there in Emmanuel College? And she said, well, not many, there's only about 10. And I said, that's brilliant. That's fantastic, because when I was here, I was the only black student. Yeah. I was the actually only black student. Yeah. In my second year, then there was another black student who came along, and he was from, I think, Gambia or something like that. But he'd actually been educated in England, because I think his father was in the government. Okay. And so he sent his son to England to be educated. So he actually had a private education. So, but yeah, he came along, and then so there were 2 of us in the whole of my 3 years there. Yeah. Wow. But yes, it was that in itself was an education. It was very different, but it shouldn't stop you from, the fact he said I was black, working class and woman made me think, why should that stop me? If I can get in, if I can get the grades, then why should that stop me? So that was my fighting mode, to be determined to actually get in. And it was a little bit strange, but I'm quite sort of an outgoing person, and I can adapt quite easy. And I think you do need to be able to adapt, and certainly at that time in that kind of situation, because it was so totally different. It's chalk and cheese kind of life. It was from what I was used to. I'd come home for the weekends and I was back into like fish and chips in the paper down the Roman Road Market. But there, when you go to hall for dinner, somebody says the grace in Latin before we eat, and everybody stands, and then the masters come out and the fellows and the dons, and it was like, wow. So it's a very different kind of life. So you had to be very flexible in order to enjoy it, in order to stay the course, and not think, my God, I'm sort of like, a lot of people sort of get complexes and think I'm the only black person here, and blah. I knew I was going to be in the minority. Didn't realise how much of a minority, but I had to have a mindset to say, regardless,
this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. So how were your parents about it, or were they encouraging, supportive? What background are they from as well?
Parents are West Indian, from Jamaica, very working class. My father worked on the buses. At that time they used to have bus conductors as well as drivers. They weren't, it's really strange. I suppose at that particular time I weren't that terribly close to them, and I wasn't actually living at home. I was living with some friends from my church, and so they weren't. And I don't think it kind of registered. I think going to university, they quite like. I think the fact to say we have a daughter who's going to university, but the fact, I suppose, that it was Cambridge was neither here nor there to them, so they didn't really understand the sort of the importance that it's steeped in culture, and it's a sort of a strong British institution, and etc. So, I think they liked the fact that their daughter went to university, and I was the first one in my sort of generation, my family. ever to go to university. I think I was the first one in my own community college that ever went to university.
Wow.
First one in my area, my street. I went to university, but they like to sort of say, "Oh, my daughter's in the university," but Cambridge didn't really register so much with it.
For them, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So where did you get your support from?
I didn't really.
Was it within?
It was very much within. It was very much within. In fact, even the church kind of, I went into a very, very strict, almost orthodox Pentecostal church.
Right.
And they didn't see life existed outside of the church. Anything outside the church didn't really exist. The church was your life and everything.
Okay.
So also, then when I said, well, I'm actually not going to be here during term time, and they kind of sort of said, they sort of frowned on. So, which seems strange, but they didn't really support neither. So I suppose, yes, support came from really within, and I have a strong faith as well, because I'm a Christian, so I have had a very strong faith, and I had to believe that this is where God wanted me to be at that time. But that was really the driving force, I think, behind me actually even thinking about applying, and it's something I really prayed about, and I felt that confirmation, I felt that peace about actually applying to go. I mean, when I went back to my college, or when I went to my college and said to them, what do you think of me applying to Cambridge? They said, what's wrong with Kent University? What's wrong with, and there's nothing wrong with them, but, I've got to do what I feel is right for me, try for the best what I think is the best for me. So, and even getting them to write, they had to write a report about me, and even, everything was a bit of a struggle, but I think in the struggle it makes you stronger. It made me more determined, and I kind of, I think if everybody had been relaxed about it, perhaps I would have thought, oh no, perhaps I would go to Cambridge, but because everybody was against it, it made me fight even more, so, and that's kind of me really.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So you finished, you graduated.
I did.
You got your degree.
I did.
And then what?
And then after university, I went to work in the BBC, and I was working in the BBC as a production assistant researcher, and I was in the BBC for a few years after graduation, about 2 or 3 years I think I was in there, but no, about three or 4 years, and that was going well. I was doing quite well, so I sort of saw a career progression sort of before me.
Okay.
And I was filming abroad and working on all like the news bulletins and Newsnight and Breakfast Time and things like that. So it was very interesting. That I think my parents liked more, the fact that my daughter works for the BBC and she works for EastEnders and et cetera, et cetera. That carried more weight, I think, than actually
Going to Cambridge.
Yeah, exactly. So that was fine, and I was getting on and enjoying that. And then when I was at university, because I was a gospel singer, because I came from a Pentecostal church, so I liked singing. And I remember I was doing a musical at college. I was in a musical and I was really pushing my voice. And at the end of the musical, I was kind of quite hoarse. So I went to the doctors, who referred me to a throat specialist. And he looked at my throat and said, yeah, your cords look a bit bruised, a bit. He said to me, young lady, if you want to continue singing, I'd advise you to find a singing teacher. So I did. In my last year. Well, a friend of mine was having singing lessons. She said, you can try my teacher. So I did. And I found I really enjoyed it. I mean, in a few months, my voice even started to change from sort of being a belty kind of gospel singer to a bit more refined classical singer. And then it came time to graduate, so I left and went down, and then you kind of think, well, I've got to get a proper job and do things. So I did, but that kind of sort of resonated with me. I kind of always remembered the singing lessons. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I used to play piano when I was young anyway, so I had a bit of a musical inclination. And so I worked in the BBC. And then out of the blue, a friend who was still there, probably in their last year, was putting on a concert of a Mozart mass that needed 4 soloists. He said, would you like to do, I don't quite know why he asked me that, because I wasn't really singing or anything, properly singing, would you like to be the soprano solo? And I said, fine, show me the music. So he gave me the music, I got a recording, and I thought, this is fantastic. So I started working on this. When I got to London, I continued with the same teacher that was in Cambridge, because he lived in London. He used to just travel to Cambridge to teach the Johns and the King's choral scholars. They had lessons, but he was based in London. So when I came to London, I continued with him. Okay. So I taught the music to him. He said, this is actually a very difficult piece of music, but if you're determined to do this concert, we can work on it. So we did, and I did this concert, and this concert went so well, I kid you not. When I went back to work on the Monday, because it was in Cambridge, I went back to Cambridge to do this concert, I gave my notice in.
Wow.
I resigned. And they said to me, what are you planning on doing then? And I said, I'm going to be a singer. I just knew that I had to sing. After this concert, I practically walked home from Cambridge. I mean, I was on such a high and the whole weekend that it was on that high I decided to write my resignation letter, and I gave him my notice. And then they said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to sing. And they said, and where are you going to do that? And I said, I have no idea. I have not a clue. I don't quite know how to go about it, but I know that I'm going to sing, and I'll find my way. Yeah. The normal progression, I think, is obviously if you go to music college and then you make all your contacts and you're sort of taught the ropes. Well, obviously I didn't go to music college, and so I didn't know a thing about singing, what I was going to do. I just knew I had to sing. So I remember I gave my notice in, and at the end of that month they asked me to stay on another month, and I was like raring to go, and I said, okay, I'll stay one more month and then I'm really going. And at the end of that month, then they sort of dangled a carrot in front of my eye and said, we need someone to go filming in Chicago. If you do this assignment, then after. But I'd already been filming in California, so the kind of filming novelty, I'd kind of done it. Yeah. So I said, no, I'm going. I don't want to go to Chicago. It's freezing anyway at this time of the year. And I just remember, and I left, and I just remembered on the Friday, well, I did my notice period, and I just remember waking up the first day I was kind of like jobless, thinking, right, what do I do now? How do you go about this? But then again, it's where my faith sort of played a real part. I really prayed and thought, right, Lord, what do I do? How do I go about this? Yeah. And you know, things started to just fall into place. Someone recommended me getting this newspaper called The Stage. And in the back, they used to have these all adverts for auditions, and there was a couple in the back of this, and so I went off to do auditions for these chorus parts, and I got into the chorus, and I thought, well, maybe that's a way in to learn about opera, if you sing in the chorus and find out about opera. And it was in one of these operas that I was rehearsing for that I got into. One of the leads in it, his mother-in-law was a teacher, and that's how I got the connection. And then I got in touch with her, and then she became my teacher for a number of years. And within 9 months of leaving the BBC, I was in my first opera, singing German, a German opera. I never sang a word of German in my life, never spoke a word of German in my life. Within 9 months, I was in my first solo operatic role, singing an opera, and then it obviously progressed from there. Wow. And it took off from there, and that's, now I'm a singer. Yeah, you just travel the world singing opera all over the place, don't you? Well, I travel. Yeah. Singing opera, oh gosh, quite what it turns out when I get there, but that's the idea. It's fantastic. Yeah, that's the idea. So that's how it all panned out for me, really. So from starting off from wanting to become a midwife, I've ended up an opera singer. So there you go, stranger things have happened, I suppose, in life, but yeah, that's my progression in life so far to date. Yeah, no, that's great. So what would you say to encourage someone that they wanted to develop in their career, or they're not quite sure, they do know what they want to do actually, because there's like 2 questions there. So someone that's not quite sure and someone that knows what they want to do, how would you encourage them to step forward? For someone who's not quite sure, and when you think about it, they're 18, 19, you know, these young kids are being asked to decide on a career, what degree we're going to do. You know, you don't really, you're so wet behind the ears that you can't really, I mean, some people definitely know I want to be a doctor. Yeah. They come from a family of doctors and they want to be a doctor, or a teacher. They come from a family of teachers and they want to be a teacher, and they know definitely that's what they want to do. But for the majority of kids going into universities or anywhere, you know, technical colleges, or you don't know what's going to happen 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. You're such a different person from when you go in 18 or 19. And a lot of them aren't sure. So you may do, you know, economics, or you may do, you know, you may do law, whatever. And then 10, 15 years, 20 years down the line, you change completely. And then there's some who really don't know what they want to do. So I suppose for those kind of people, or kids, or whoever, be grown up, doesn't matter. I think keep searching. You've got to find something that registers in you. I think basically, if you find you could do something, you're doing something, and you'd quite happily do it without being paid, then that may be a sign that may be an area that you should explore a bit more. If you're willing to do it to do it on a voluntary basis, because you find that you've got an inclination towards it, a pull towards it, that could be a sign that may be an area you should develop and see if that would lead you to where perhaps you think is your calling as such. Try different things. I mean, there's some people that just really don't know and they don't care, and there's some they do care, but just say, you hear a lot of time, I don't know what would I do? But I think that could be, because for me, the music, I suppose, resonated very much with me, but it is something I'd quite happily do if I could afford it for nothing, which tells me this is where, you know, you should be, as opposed to your passion. In a job that, you know, maybe pays you a lot of money and you're not really happy in it, but you've got commitments, and so therefore, you know, you've got to sort of grin and bear it. But to follow your dream, for those who do, you'll get there if you are determined. If you have a support network, that's even better. But even if you don't, your support will be the drive of your determination, that, you know, I can do this. Against all the odds, when everyone said to me, forget it, don't go to Cambridge. I mean, why are you going to apply there? You're not going to get in. I thought, except there was one teacher, and I remember I spoke to her, she was my English teacher, I was doing A-level English, and she said, and I said, what do you think of the idea? I mean, everyone's poo-pooing the idea of me applying, blah, 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 blah. No one's being sort of supportive in that sense. And that weekend, she'd read the Sunday Observer or something, and there'd been this great big article about the Oxbridge lottery. She said, give it a go. Give it a go. If you try and you don't get in, you know that you tried. But if you never try, you'll have that nagging doubt that, what if I tried, I might have made it. And that's all I had to feed on. But that was what drove me. So, you know, if you have a dream, if you have a support network, that's brilliant. If you don't, you've got to try it. If you try and you fail, at least you would have got it out your system. I tried. And even if you fail, that doesn't always mean the end. Try again. Try another avenue. That may not be the direct road, may not be the road. You might have to zigzag your way to get to where you want. But I think if you really, really, really want it, you'll get there. You'll find it. You'll find your way. You will find your way. And not to give up, you know, to be really determined. And you'll know your determination, because people start off with zeal, just like people make New Year's resolutions, and then sort of halfway through January, by the end of January, most of it's gone out the window. And so your heart wasn't really in it. It was just a thing of the moment. But if you really, really want something, that zeal will never go. That passion, it will be your driving force, and will take you to where eventually you want to become, hopefully.
Thank you. So if you had to name 3 successful leadership traits that you could call on, that gets you through and keeps you going, or you'd say to someone, these are my successful leadership traits that got me where I am today, doing something that I love, that I'm passionate about, and that I enjoy, and I would do for nothing. If it wasn't for these traits, it may have gone a different way. Which 3 would you call upon?
Gosh, I think there's so many, really. Obviously, determination. Persistence. Persist. I suppose that ties in with determination, but especially in something, I suppose, that I do, when you're in the arts, the knockbacks are just, you know, second to none. It's not a direct career progression like law. You'll do your degree, then you'll go to law school, then you'll do your training contract, and then hopefully someone will employ you. Or medicine, it has a direct sort of progression to become a doctor. The arts are not like that. That people say being in the right place at the right time, who you know, Elements of that are quite true. Obviously, you've got to be prepared and ready so that when your time comes, you can step it out and you're ready for it. But there is no direct pathway to it. There's there can be a lot of heartache, lots and lots of disappointments, lots of setbacks. So you have to persist. You've got to, and passion, that's obviously, it's the passion I think that will drive you. It will drive your determination, the passion to want to do this. Try doing something else. You feel like a duck out of water. You'll do it, but your heart's not in it. Whereas you'll do what you want to do, even if it's not on the scale or the level you want, but the mere fact you're doing it, it's your passion that will drive your persistence, will drive your determination. And one more, which is most crucial for me, is prayer. I mean, prayer for me was the overriding factor that kind of guided me and sort of led me. And in fact, it was prayer that kind of fueled my passion, my persistence and my determination. They're the three, I think, that I can call on and think about sort of to hand readily. Those three. In fact, I still have to have them in order to still persist, because it's still a fight and it's not easy. It's still very competitive, still very difficult. But,
and I guess it's not really that diverse as well in that sort of area of being a singer that does classical music, opera and that sort of thing. Is it quite diverse in terms of different women and different backgrounds, or is it?
Again, we find ourselves as a black woman in the minority, but certain roles I probably wouldn't be considered to be cast for because I'm black. I don't think that's a discrimination. I don't have complexes. I don't think, it's because I'm black. I'm just so pragmatic that maybe it wouldn't work if you're the sister to someone. It's got to have that degree of credibility attached to it. Some black singers do take it quite personally, but see, I don't have the energy for that. My energy is just to try to make it really good as a singer. I haven't got energy to think, I'm black, they don't want me. And also I think the application that I use is the same one when I went to Cambridge. He said to me I was black, working class and woman, and I suppose those factors were true. He wasn't being nasty at all, because he was a teacher that we really liked and was very encouraging. I think in his eyes he was being practical, but that element existed and that's true, but I didn't let that stop me. So it's spilled over now to what I'm doing now. So if I don't get it because I am black, I don't take that as a problem. It's not I don't take it as a fault. It's just a fact. In fact, I recently last year did a role. It was for an opera, Henry VIII, and I played the role of his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. She's the one that brought about the Reformation, because he divorced her. So he split from the Catholic Church, divorced her, and married Anne Boleyn. And I played the role of Catherine of Aragon, and I remember turning up for my first rehearsal, and shock horror, a black woman walks in to play Catherine of Aragon, and I remember saying to my teacher, they looked a little bit shocked. I mean, they were trying to be diplomatic and polite, but they were thinking, blimey, they've cast a black Catherine of Aragon. But my teacher said to me, actually, Catherine of Aragon, she was Spanish, and she probably, if she came from some certain parts of Spain, they are sort of quite darker in colour. So I just had to bear that in mind every time I was rehearsing. I come from the part of Spain where they sort of have slightly darker people. And it was really funny, because after the first night, the mayor of the city, he was invited, and he came up, and he was not diplomatic at all. Diplomacy wasn't his strong point. He said, I've never seen a black Catherine of Aragon before. And I said, you have now. I'll be your first. So there again, outside the box, somebody brought me inside and decided that, we're going to cast a black Catherine of Aragon. But normally, well, I don't know normally, but, I wasn't sure whether I'd be considered, but I still went for it. I just thought, you never know. If I don't go, who knows? I might have got it, and I did get it. So I was glad I did it, and it was a brilliant role. It's one of my best roles, really. So, and some other roles where I've been cast, where the stereotypical singer is sort of European, white, Caucasian, and I've been cast. So, Yeah, persistence, determination and passion.
Yeah. So lastly, what advice would you give to anyone? You were saying, you know, the passion, be yourself, and you were talking about something else there.
Yeah, I think believe in yourself, not to the degree that you're kind of like very big-headed and think, you know, I'm the best. And there's lots of that, especially in the kind of world I'm in. But confident that you can do the best you can, that you can achieve what you set out to achieve. Believe in yourself, really, to believe in yourself that you can do it. And people, well-meaning people, may tell you, perhaps don't try this, or you know, this. But you've got to give yourself the opportunity to try it. If you try and decide it isn't what I want to do, that's fine. There's no disgrace in that. You know, you'll find something maybe that does click with you. But keep going, keep believing, and you'll get there. You will. You'll definitely get there.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Okay. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.